Give us a sense. You followed this over the years. Is just this more of the same, or is there something deeper and darker going on here right now with the way China and the United States are talking to one another?
It's pretty deep and it's pretty dark, David. It's obviously, as I'm sure everybody is aware. I mean, I think the temperature of Sino-U.S. relations has been getting, I don't know whether we should say it's going into the deep freeze or it's boiling hot, but I mean, either way, obviously things have been getting progressively worse during the course of this year. I mean, if you just cast your mind back, it wasn't that long ago in January that President Trump and President Xi Jinping agreed to a truce in the trade war. Now, that may not have lasted very long under the best of circumstances, but anyway, at that point, we were still in a kind of a frosty, environment, but one in which, basically business was still possible and getting done. But ever since then, really, it's been downhill. And of course, with the presidential election coming up at the end of this year, it's it's not one-sided, obviously, deterioration. It's as bad on the Chinese side as it is on the U.S. side. But I think both sides are basically playing pretty tough game at the moment.
And George, what is the situation from President Xi's point of view? We saw those numbers that come out last week indicating that industrial production had come back, oil consumption has come back in China, but maybe not the consumer. Retail sales were disappointing. What does it tell us, if anything, about the resilience of the Chinese consumer in this rebound?
Yeah, that's a good question because actually in some respects, China offers us a little bit of a window on our own world about 6 to 10 weeks down the track. Because they just happen to be ahead of us in terms of where they are in this evolution of the pandemic. So there's a dichotomy in China between production and demand. So it certainly looks like it's been a lot easier for the Chinese government and the authorities to basically ramp up production, to get electricity production and coal mining and steel production and anything that can produce basically is now running back up at almost where it was or even slightly above where it was before the Chinese New Year in January. But the demand side of the economy, the consumer side, is still pretty disappointing. China is starting to normalize, but it's not normal. And part of the problem is huge unemployment. The officially registered unemployment rate in cities is 6%, which is about 27 million people. But that's widely regarded as being a chronic underestimate, and it certainly excludes about 56 million migrant workers who have not been able to return from their countryside to their jobs in cities. So basically, you should think about Chinese unemployment somewhere between 15-20%, basically. So that's a big drag on the consumer. Wages and salaries have been knocked back, partly as a consequence, partly because of weak demand in the economy. And of course, Chinese consumer behavior is not really what it used to be. So, people are not going to cinemas, restaurants, shops. The footfall is not like it used to be. One imagines that over time these things will sort themselves out if and when we ever have vaccines and as the coronavirus problem becomes more of a nuisance rather than a sort of a daily threat. But for the time being, there is this dichotomy. And of course, if companies are producing a lot of stuff and consumers aren't buying, then you've got an inventory problem which is piling up for some time in the fall.
Well, and George, as you look at the state of the Chinese economy right now, what does that tell us, if anything, about President Xi's ability to deliver on that trade agreement that you mentioned that we thought we were going to get done in January? President Trump still isn't walking away from that. Does President Xi have the wherewithal to deliver on buying the things to the United States he promised?
Yeah, I think we have to kind of pretty much accept that the terms of that agreement just cannot be fulfilled. In the first place, there have been reports, I think, I've seen about China sort of increasing its purchases of some U.S. agricultural produce. But basically, if you look at some of the big promises that were made in manufacturing, in agriculture, and in energy. There's just no way that China is going to be able to import this year anything close to the $190 billion worth of additional products that were part of that Phase 1 trade deal. And I don't think it's churlishness on the Chinese side. It's just the economy, obviously, as we know, went through kind of a terrible period during February and March. So fundamental demand in China is weak. It is starting to recover a little bit, but it's, as I said, it's quite slow. And so, Chinese imports, generally speaking, not just from the United States but elsewhere, have been really, really soft. So I don't really know. I mean, at some point, one imagines that the two sides will have to decide what they want to do about the Phase 1 trade deal, either just to basically, call it off or renegotiate it or try something new. But for the moment, I guess it's just not top of anybody's particular agenda.
And George, just to wrap this up briefly, it's not just the economic side, it's also the geopolitical side. We had Secretary Mike Pompeo congratulate the president, as he called her, of Taiwan, and China reacted virulently to it. That is a really sore subject for China. Do you think that was inadvertent on the Secretary of State's part?
I'm tempted to think not, David. I mean, in the today's climate of tit for tat and kind of nationalist, to and fro, I think that any overture. I mean, the White House and the State Department certainly understand well the sensitivity of Taiwan. So from a Chinese point of view, and so if they are going to make, or if they have made overtures or pleasant noises, so to speak, to the president of Taiwan, or certainly they were behind a move to try to bring Taiwan into the to observer status at the World Health Organization recently. I mean, I think they know that this is calculated to cause friction. Much as the Chinese also know how to cause friction for the United States. But I mean, that is, I think, is a sorry state of where we are at the moment, is that the tenor of relations is so low, really, and trust relations have kind of evaporated so much that there is this kind of, mutual teasing that's going on. One imagines and hopes that at some point, the grown-ups will come into the room and try and sort this out.